Hello and welcome to ReConnected. This is where we listen to stories from spinal cord tumor survivors. We aim to provide connection between survivors by telling our stories. Our purpose is to increase awareness about what life is like after being diagnosed with an intramedullary spinal cord tumor. Because our diagnosis is so rare, it is hard to find information from the patient's perspective. At ReConnected, we talk with the experts, and the experts are the ones living with the diagnosis and surviving the surgery. My name is Dawn Standera, and I am a survivor of a C1, C2 intramedullary ependymoma. That's spinal cord tumor lingo for a tumor inside my spinal cord, right at the tip top of my spine. Today, we get to hear Deb's story. Deb and I are tumor twins. Welcome, Deb. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Yeah. So, when were you diagnosed and where is your tumor?
I was formally diagnosed in September of 2011, but they believe I've had my tumor since at least 2004. My tumor is where your tumor was, C1, C2, and they believe it's like yours was, an intramedullary ependymoma as well.
Perfect. Thank you. We are tumor twins. Full disclosure, Deb and I have known each other for about 10 years. We met a couple years before I had my surgery. She and I have become good friends, and I'm so pleased to have her be our first guest. Deb wrote a chapter for our book, the book ReConnected. I think you can see kind of the cover of that. Um, in her book, she writes that you write that your tumor was an incidental finding on an MRI. And I think a lot of our tumors are found that way. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got diagnosed?
Yeah, initially, my migraine doctor was the one that found what was initially called a smudge on an MRI. I had a brain MRI because she randomly asked if I'd like one because I hadn't had one for a while when I first met her. And I said, sure, why not? And the smudge that had showed up during an injury back in 2004 showed up again when I met her in 2011. And I wasn't overly concerned about it, but she was because she didn't know me. So when she called me, I was called back to the doctor's office in 2011, and I really hesitated to go in because at that point in time, I was so concerned with my bad spine, which is another issue that I have among others. And I'd been going into Boston during my lunch break. And because I was having so many doctor's appointments, I actually went to the wrong hospital. And I wasn't going to go to the hospital, I was going back to work. And I called to cancel my appointment. They said, no, 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 you have to come in. So I finally acquiesced. I went in to Boston, went to the hospital, and that's when I was told that this smudge had doubled in size, and they were calling it a lesion at this point. And I was freaking out because they said the word tumor, and that's when my brain sort of stopped. And I just they didn't use the word cancer. They said I believe they might have said intramedullary ependymoma. At this point, I sort of forget, but I just sort of everything just sort of froze for me, and I was just asking them, well, okay, if this thing is in me, can we just get rid of it? Let's just take it out. How soon can we get it out of me? They said it wasn't that simple. I said, okay, well, then can we just biopsy it? Let's start with that. I was clueless. And from there, the diagnosis piece for me was just horrific. And one would think, Boston being the mecca for medical everything, at that point in time in 2011, it really wasn't. It took um, 4 hospitals and 6 surgeons until I hit upon somebody who really knew what they were talking about and who could actually help me. And that was over a time span of about 6 weeks. And it was a really, really difficult 6 weeks. And that was part of an unbelievably, amazingly challenging journey that, unbeknownst to me, was sort of just starting for me. So that's how my diagnosis started. But it felt like it was forever, and it was really painful. It was really frustrating. And it really put me into a tailspin for a while. I was sort of in, I was almost emotionally incapacitated for almost a year. I still went to work, I still functioned, but I was really obsessed with and consumed by my tumor for quite a while.
I love what you said there because you're speaking about just how gobsmacked we all are when we get diagnosed. Never heard of a spinal cord tumor before, had no idea. I had the same reaction. Can we just take it out? Can we just biopsy it? And then there's this huge learning curve about why biopsies are dangerous and why taking tumors out of our spinal cord just cause trouble. And it becomes like a huge learning curve. And then finding the right people that you feel safe with. I think everything that you spoke about is something that I hear from every single person that I've ever spoken about with this diagnosis. We all go through the same thing. Um, and then what you said about being obsessed with it, 100%. I waited, for those of you who don't know, I waited 4 years and 10 months before having surgery after getting diagnosed. And I don't think a day went by when I didn't wonder if a symptom that I was having was caused by the tumor or caused by something else. And I know you've gone through a lot of that. You want to speak to that a little bit, like dealing with the mental part of learning to live with this diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. Um, I felt so unbelievably alone because our disease is so unbelievably rare. And being so high up, it's even more rare. And because I've got other health conditions and medical conditions, it's even more difficult for my surgeon and for me as well to figure out, as the symptoms became more frequent and more intense, is the symptom even a spinal cord tumor symptom? Because I didn't initially have symptoms, or if I did have symptoms, I didn't know that they were spinal cord tumor symptoms. And then as my symptoms progressed, I didn't know if it was a spinal cord tumor symptom or my bad back symptom, and or another random health condition that I do have. So, in terms of my mental health, especially the first year, I was terrified. I was just confused. I was sort of just waiting for something horrible to happen as well. It was just this impending doom that was looming over me. Um, and I was trying desperately to find resources. I was looking for a support group. I was looking for any information that I could find. And it's not like it was all that long ago in time, but it feels like the resources were not nearly as available as they are now. So again, that was really, really hard for me. And I was still working at the time, and I felt really isolated at work. I was going through a difficult period, um, spinal cord tumor aside, at work. So I didn't want to jeopardize anything at work, and that I might be looked upon negatively, like I couldn't do my job. So I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
share my condition with anybody for fear that I would be looked down upon, that I wasn't able to do my job. And yet my job was super important to me because I needed it to try to keep my mind off of the spinal cord tumor. So it was it was just this push and pull of all these forces, and I needed to work out. Working out is super important to me, and it continues to be. It's the only time I can even marginally get out of my head, and it's the only way I can relax. But it was just so hard because I was so obsessed with my tumor that I just couldn't get away from it. It was everywhere. It was hard to
Yeah.
do daily things. It was hard to eat. It was hard to sleep. It was hard to go food shopping. Uh, Friends would actually have to take me food shopping because the simplest things were just so hard for me to do. And I would equate everything to my tumor. If I went to a baseball game, I'd be thinking, oh my goodness, is this the last Red Sox game I'm going to go to?
Oh.
I was
Mhm.
still racing at the time. I used to do triathlons every weekend, and I was still doing everything. But part of me was thinking, oh my goodness, is that this the last triathlon I'm going to do? Is this the last road race I'm going to do? And I kept doing everything, but I couldn't get out of my own way. I couldn't get out of my head.
I think that's so brave of you to talk about the mental health side of it. I think it's under talked about, but it takes a toll for sure. It did on me. I can completely resonate with what you're talking about. Um, you wrote in your chapter in Reconnected that I managed to survive my first year with the tumor. Nothing magical happened. I just slowly came to terms with the reality that this was my life and I could not change it. I could only change the way that I dealt with it. Before we talk about your working out and stuff, because I know you still use your your exercise. I know you did a huge hike yesterday, which is super cool. But I think it's important that we talk about our symptoms, um, because I know in my experience in the 4 years from when I was diagnosed, which was they accidentally found the tumor, to when I had it, my numbness started in my toes and started going up my legs. It was in my fingers and it was going up my arms. I had intermittent headaches, then I had a 3 year headache. Symptoms change, and it was very difficult to for anybody to tell me what was tumor related and what wasn't. But people are always interested in hearing what symptoms are like. Are you comfortable talking about what some of your symptoms, what they've been like and how they've changed?
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks.
Mine started basic with, I guess, your classic numbness and tingling. Um, and then it progressed to just really weird, random stuff that continues on to today. The numbness and tingling continues, but it's sort of like phases, because that is actually less so now than it was at the beginning. And the zings and the zaps and the sort of electrical shocks,
Yeah.
it's I went through phases with all that.
Hmm.
Um, what what stuck is just almost like losing parts of my body to numbness. And that progressed over time. It wasn't anything linear, except that parts of my body disappeared, and the parts of my body that have disappeared in terms of feeling, those are gone. I cannot feel, but it's not a classic numbness. It's a weird numbness. I don't feel parts of my body the same way. my left foot. But when I move certain ways, especially when I really can't run anymore, but when I jog, and I call it a jogalope because I know I'm awkward and lopsided. So when I move, or I call it running or jogging or jogaloping, that numbness will, my left foot is just gone, but it could go all the way up to my left hip. And then it's really weird, but on my right side, I can't feel my right quad, but not all the way on the inside. It's on the outside of my right quad. It's like alligator skin. Um, but I can feel on the inside of that part. And then one morning, I just woke up and my right shoulder was gone, but on the outside as well. And yet one day, when I was taking a brisk walk, fireworks went on literally. It's like my left shoulder was short circuiting, and that was really painful, and it just had a firework party inside, and then it just burnt out, and then that was gone. And then I thought I was going to lose my left no my right calf, and part of that disappeared, but not totally. Weird stuff like that. And then I get these weird um banding sensations that somebody's squeezing me with these thick, wide elastic bands. That happens really randomly, but I've noticed recently it happens a lot in water, especially when I'm showering, and that just happens. But then it comes back.
I
Um,
love that you talk about it not being linear because I think that's everybody's experience. And I think that's what makes it really hard for medical providers to diagnose us because I would go into pre-diagnosis, even post-diagnosis, and say, well, the other day I couldn't feel the
mhm.
left side of my face. Like I had a lot of problems with the left side of my face before surgery. It would just disappear.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, but then it would come back. And they're like,
exactly.
well, can you feel it today? I'd say, yeah. Okay,
Yes,
well, great. Things are fixed. I'm like, yeah, but maybe tomorrow I will feel it again.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's so strange because we can understand how medical providers would be just confused by us and really we're very hard to diagnose. And I think everybody I've ever spoken to has had decades, years, if not decades, of being misdiagnosed. Um, so you were diagnosed in really 2004, but knew about it in 2011, and now it's 2023, and you still have your tumor.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I don't think, are aware that that's an option.
Hmm.
Um, some people they outlive their tumors. Some people can't stand the thought of having a tumor, and there's everything in between. So as far as I know, you're the person who's lived with a tumor the longest that I've met so far. It's a long time. And do you want to speak about that, the decision of do I have surgery, do I not have surgery, and how that shifted?
Well, one point when I was initially formally diagnosed, I had made the decision to try to outlive it. And then as my symptoms started to come on and become more frequent and become more problematic because I've declined. I lost swimming for 2 years. I completely lost it, and swimming is my favorite thing in the world. I've been swimming since I was 5 years old. It was my vocation as well when I was working, and to lose that was devastating. I thought it was permanent, but I worked really, really hard to get it back. I got it back last year, and I lost it again, but I'm planning on getting it back again. So at one point, I'd made a decision to have surgery by the time I was 60. 60 came and went 3 years ago, so I revised my decision because I can do whatever I want, frankly. So my new plan is try to outlive it now. That's my new plan.
That's amazing.
And my fear is that if I were to have surgery, if something went bad, I would be devastated because being physical is so important to me that if I were to wake up from surgery and if I were to lose something, honestly, I wouldn't want to wake up from surgery. That's me. Other people are stronger in that aspect than I am, but that's just not me. It's too dear to me. And I have lost some motor stuff. Not I haven't lost some motor stuff, but I've lost some sensory stuff.
Yeah.
Even with the swimming piece, when my swimming got so messed up, I could still move and swim. But it was the sensory stuff that was completely a wreck. And I'm like, okay, I've still got my motor skills with swimming, but the sensory just blew up. And it was so disturbing to me. I mean, I could not swim for 2 years.
Mm.
So if surgery is just beyond terrifying to me, it's so terrifying to me that I really feel so adamant that I really maybe it's just so overwhelming to me that right now, unless I absolutely had to have the surgery, I won't have the surgery. And I'm really, really stubborn. I can be super, super stubborn, but sometimes that stubbornness is really powerful for me because it drives me through things. And
Yeah.
that's okay right now.
And as I've always said, if that day ever comes, I'll be there when you wake up from surgery.
Thank you, Dawn.
We just have a few minutes left. I want to ask just if you could speak a little bit about what it has meant to you to be in connection with other people that are going through what you go through.
Oh my gosh, it's meant the world to me. I mean,
Mm.
meeting you, meeting my friend Merv,
Yeah.
it's meant the world to me because this disease is so rare. There's so few of us that understand what it's like to go through this. Friends and family are awesome, but most of the world, how's your back, how's your neck? Well, my back is sore, my neck is fine, thank you very much for asking. They mean well, they get it to a point, but I firmly believe that unless you live through it, you really don't totally get it. And
Yeah.
so it's meant the world to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel the same. And that's exactly the reason why we're doing this. It's the reason why people took their own time, to write their stories in here about tumors in different locations and all kinds of different outcomes. So thank you for being a part of that, Deb.
Thank you for
So,
letting me.
so good to see you. Thank you for being my first guest. And thank you for helping other people feel less alone. That's really important.
It's invaluable. Thanks.
All right. Well, I think my next is going to be with Merv, our mutual friend. So I'll look forward to hearing that. And thanks again. Bye, Deb.
Thank you. Bye bye.